Good morning. If you're watching this is World Geography. We're doing Unit 4, which is Economic Geography. You'll have vocab test review to do for this. The vocab key, test review key will go live tomorrow morning. Your vocab quiz will go live tomorrow. Test will go live on Friday. If you are a B-Day student or online student, A-Day students, you'll take the test on this unit next Monday. So, economic geography. First, we need to talk about different types of resources. Okay? So, economic activity can be classified as primary, secondary, tertiary, or quaternary. I hope I pronounced that right. You have natural, human, and capital resources that influence human activity. Resources are not distributed equally, okay? Not every place has access to the same resources. The availability of natural resources is directly connected to the economic activity and culture of the region. So, like always, your notes key is with the PowerPoint, so if you miss something or I go a little too fast, that's where it is. So you can see right here, this map, natural resources in North America. Up here is manufacturing. You have commercial farming through here, livestock through here, forestry. For example, we can't go 5 miles down the road from Hillsville and find an oil well. Okay? We don't have oil here. Texas, Alaska, they have access to oil. West Virginia, coal. Fishing, go to Florida or up in Maine. That makes sense? Natural resources differ based where you are. So when you talk about natural resources, there's two different types of natural resources. You have renewable, and these are resources that will renew. Okay, stuff that replaces itself in a good enough amount of time that it can be reliably used. Okay? For example, soil, water, the sun, wind, forest, things like that. Okay? Non-renewable resources, these are ones that don't renew themselves in a good enough amount of time for humans to reliably replace them, such as fossil fuels, oil, coal, natural gas, metals such as gold and iron, minerals, salt, things like that, phosphorus, phosphates. Questions here. Do we get the difference between renewable and non-renewable? Okay. Human resources. These are like the number of people in a country, the level of education. These are the things that have to do with the people themselves. Okay? Capital resources, this is like money for investments, infrastructure. Do they have good ports, good roads, good telecommunications? The availability of Sorry, I'm trying to talk too fast. Getting sidetracked. I'm a little excited. They just released a new trailer for the new season of The Mandalorian, so I got to see Baby Yoda, and that made me really happy. And mine's all over the place. I need to focus. So, let's try this again. Capital resources include the availability, there we go, and use of tools, machines, technologies, things like this. Questions there. We all good with these? Okay, levels of economic activity. Stop copying notes for a second. I literally just want you to pay attention because this is very confusing if you don't pay attention. Okay? There are 4 levels of economic activity. The first 2 make sense. The second 2 are very easy to confuse. So primary is dealing directly with the resources. This is mining, fishing, forestry, farming, things like that. If you are getting the resources, that is primary. That's first. Okay? Think of it like a pyramid. This is the base of that pyramid. Okay? Secondary is manufacturing and processing. So if you mine the iron, You send it to a steel mill to be turned into steel. This is that second step, okay? Where they assemble cars, sawmills. I don't know, let's think about ketchup. Okay? Ketchup is a good example here. So, the primary level of ketchup is the farmers harvesting the tomatoes. Right? Secondary level of ketchup is where they send it to the factory, all the ingredients get mixed, and it gets put in the bottle. You with me? Okay. Get these two copied down real quick, then we'll go to tertiary. I can't pronounce that on a good day, so I ain't too worried about it. Okay. Tertiary. These are services, transportation, retail, information technology services. Tertiary with ketchup would be when you buy the ketchup at Walmart. Okay? Quaternary, this is a service sector concerned with the collection, processing, manipulation of information and capital. For example, finance, administration, insurance, legal services. Say everybody starts dying because of the ketchup. Okay? They get sick. Quaternary is the lawyers who handle the lawsuits regarding the ketchup. Does it make sense? Can you see where these two are easy to get mixed up? Because this is services, this is a service sector, but it's like a step away. Does it make sense? Okay. How to put the Geico up there? Okay. You see insurance, you got to put the Geico. Side note, this has nothing to do with this. They got Halloween costumes at Walmart. My kid loves that show, PJ Masks. It's on Disney Junior. One of the characters is named Gecko, and he has like super strength, dressed like a lizard, whatever. They had the costume at Walmart. So last night we had dinner with my parents, and we were telling my dad, we saw a costume for Gecko, and Luke really liked it, and we might let him dress up like that for Halloween. And my dad goes, like the Geico Gecko? I'm like, no, we're not dressing our kid up like an insurance lizard. It's a character from a cartoon he likes that we had just talked to my dad about like 3 days ago.
But what if he ends up growing up and working for Geico?
Then he can dress up like the Geico lizard. Effects of unequal distribution of resources. You have interdependence of nations, okay? Because not every nation has all the resources they need, they have to trade, okay? I mean, it's that simple. They just have to trade. You have uneven economic development. You have a dependence on outside assistance. So, for example, you have super developed nations like the United States, Japan, South Korea, England, France, areas like that. Then you have developing nations that aren't as advanced. A lot of South Asia, Africa, South America, areas like this. Eastern Europe's kind of in a weird middle ground. You have energy producers and consumers. The United States is an energy consumer. We use a ton of oil. Saudi Arabia is an energy producer. They produce a ton of oil. Imperialism, colonialism is not that big of a deal anymore. You have conflict. I mean, when Iraq invaded Kuwait back in 93, 92, 91, early 90s, they set fire to Kuwait's oil wells, so Kuwait couldn't use the oil. They couldn't use the resources. And I just realized I wandered very close to that camera. I am sorry. Stay over here in my corner. Fertile soil and availability of water lead to agriculture. Okay? You have good soil, you have a good amount of water, you're going to grow crops. If you have natural resources and a lot of human resources to harvest the natural resources, then you're going to have industry. High level of human resources and capital investment can overcome a lack of natural resources, like Japan. They import a lot of raw materials, but they produce a lot of things through industry. Make sense? Questions? What? You guess? y'all a second here. Friday's what, the 18th?
Yeah.
Capital what?
Investment.
Investment.
So resources influence economic activity and how the land is used, okay? And the value of resources change over time. The same resource isn't worth the same amount today as it was 100 years ago. Or it was worthless 100 years ago, and it's very expensive now. For example, the steam engine. The demand for coal skyrocketed when the steam engine was invented. Internal combustion engines, what's in your car? This caused the demand for oil to skyrocket. Now there's a huge demand for skilled labor because of computer chips. You have to be able to develop, manipulate, program these little chips. Skilled labor, yes. Questions here? Going once, going twice. So, with land use, this is common sense, okay? If you require extensive areas of land, you can't use areas that have small amounts of land. Like if you're going to grow a commercial farm, a huge farm, you're going to need a ton of land. Whereas if you're just growing a garden for your family, you just need a backyard. Make sense? Land uses that are compatible with each other versus ones that aren't. You're not going to put a landfill in a neighborhood. Okay? You're going to put a neighborhood in the open space where there's room to build houses. You're going to put a landfill on the other side of town from the neighborhood. People don't want to grow up smelling trash. Does that make sense? This is the same stuff we covered last unit, but still, wood causes deforestation, coal leads to pollution, mining issues, competition, petroleum was due to transportation and leads to environmental issues, nuclear power leads to contamination or waste, solar wind, it costs a lot, and they don't look pretty. Okay, nobody wants a whole bunch of windmills in their backyard.
Or what if you're just,
Well, if you're obsessed with windmills, you're obsessed with the pretty ones like in the Netherlands and not the ones that look like giant blades that will cut your head off. Fair enough? Questions? Alright. This is where a lot of maps happen. And we're going to hit these pretty quick. Developed and developing nations. Levels of economic development vary from country to country, from place to place. Within countries, you can have areas that are very developed and undeveloped in the same nation. So indicators of economic development. You have urban-rural ratio. I hate that word. These are the number of people that live in cities versus the countryside. Labor force characteristics. This is what we just talked about. How much of the labor force is in primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary sectors? Gross domestic product per capita, or GDP per capita. It's how much money an average family earns in a year. Educational achievements. How many skilled workers are there in a country? Criteria used to assess the standard of living and quality of life include population growth rate. This is how much a population grows per year. Population age distribution is how old the population is. Some countries are younger than others. Literacy rate is how many people can read and write. Life expectancy is how long the average person lives. Infant mortality rate is how many babies die either at birth or within the first year of life. This is per 1,000. Percentage of urban population, this is the number of people living in cities. come right back to this, I think.
No.
Okay, we're getting close to maps. That's it. A whole lot of maps. Okay. Developed and developing. With developed countries, you have a high per capita GDP, high life expectancy, low population growth rate, low infant mortality rate, high literacy rate. Basically, with developed countries, you have high of the good things, low of the bad things. And it's the opposite for developing. You have a low GDP per capita, low life expectancy, high population growth rate, high infant mortality rate, and a low literacy rate. Okay? Examples of developed countries include the US, Canada, Australia, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, Western Europe, Israel, the UAE, Bahrain. Developing countries include China, which has some highly developed industries and very modern cities, but there's still most of the country is still developing. Brazil, South Africa, most of South America, Africa, and Southern Asia. Eastern Europe, Russia are kind of in a weird middle ground. They're what used to be known as second world countries. They're like the middle child here. So, excuse me. Dark blue is developed. Light blue is that like weird middle ground. Orange and red are developing. Here's your population growth rate. So if you look at this map versus this map, the higher growth rates are in the developing areas. Okay, can you see that? Same thing here. The darker it is, the higher the literacy rate. It's the same thing. Higher literacy rate in the more developed areas. Life expectancy, the darker it is, the darker green it is, the longer they live. Same thing. These developed areas have longer life expectancies. Some areas in Africa, life expectancy doesn't even hit 40 down in here.
Wow.
Whereas with Canada, it's over 80. Different things, disease, lack of access to health care, war, bunch of conflict, just varying factors. Infant mortality rate, same thing. The darker it is, the less babies die in the first year per 1,000. The darkest it gets here, 110. So like right here, I want to say this is Mali. Okay, theirs is about 10%. For every 1,000 babies born, 100 of them die before the first year, or they die at birth. So
So like 1 out of 10 die?
1 out of 10, yeah, basically. Whereas with the United States, it's under 5 babies, so that would be, that's a whole lot of math. Okay, if 100 is 10%, and 5 is 20%, it's like 0.5% or less. My math's a little off there, but. GDP per capita. The darker blue it is, the more money a family makes per year. For example, in the US and Canada, it's either $30,000 a year or higher, whereas like in Madagascar, it's $0 to $1,000 a year. Differences between these nations include access to natural resources, access to capital resources, number of skilled and human resources, levels of economic development, standard of living, quality of life, relationship between economic development and quality of life. So we have developing, developed. These are different economic unions. Sorry. These are areas that produce oil. That's what it is. So these are energy producers. Globalization. High point here, comparative advantage. Okay, this is the ability of countries to produce goods and services at lower costs than other countries, resulting in exports. For example, China can produce cars a lot cheaper than Canada. Canada can produce wheat cheaper than China. So Canada trades wheat to China for cars. Does that make sense? That's comparative advantage. I could show you the really weird formula, but I don't want to do that. It hurts my head. I don't want to show it. Make you guys worry about it. This is math. This whole unit is math. Like how the physical geography unit was science, this one's math.
Fun.
Yeah. So here's the main things that each country exports. So like Canada, we export capital goods. Greenland is fish. Australia's coal. Saudi Arabia's oil. Russia's oil. Mongolia's copper. Mexico's cloth and shoes. Okay, does that make sense?
What were they?
Capital goods. Things that influence economic activity. Access to resources. Access to funds to purchase capital resources. Excuse me. Shoot. Location and ability to exchange goods. Landlocked countries. That means they don't have access to an ocean. Okay? It's like Switzerland, Bolivia, Rwanda, Mongolia. Coastal and island countries have an easier time exchanging goods because they're on the coast. If you're closer to shipping lanes, it saves you money. And if you have access to good communication networks, it makes it easier to transport goods. And you have economic alliances that provide access to markets, such as the European Union and the North American Free Trade Agreement. No, we're good. We'll see how much longer it works, but we're good for now. These are landlocked countries. Green is landlocked. Purple, you're double landlocked. And that really sucks.
What does that mean? Oh, well, you got two countries on all sides?
Basically, landlocked is you have one country between you and the water. Double landlocked is you have two countries between you and the water. There's literally one double landlocked country. Well, there's a couple in Europe. One big one. It's right here.
How does that suck?
Because now you have to pay two countries to transport your goods to the ocean to transport instead of just one.
Oh. Well, then you may just have to unite nations.
You have countries that specialize in goods and services, and you have an exchange of goods and services. That's common sense. So, how come some countries I'm sorry, I cannot stop yawning today. Japan's highly industrialized, okay? Japan's got the robots. If the robots ever take over the world, it's going to be Japan's fault. Russia has numerous resources, but it's not profitable to develop them because most of it's located in Siberia, which is a frozen wasteland that no one wants to go to. And Russia's huge. Okay, you have to go very long distances to extract the resources. The U.S., we have a very diverse economy, we have abundant natural resources, we have specialized industries. We're good with our economy and our resources. Côte d'Ivoire, I butchered that. This is the country formerly known as the Ivory Coast. Okay, they just changed the name. Once they got freedom, they changed the name. They have limited natural resources. They exchange cash crops for manufactured goods. They are the world's largest producer of cocoa beans. And they also produce a lot of coffee, palm oil, things like that. 68% of the population works in agriculture here. In comparison, in the United States, 0.6% work in agriculture. It's a drastic difference. Switzerland has very limited natural resources, so instead they produce services. Switzerland's big thing is banking. Okay, Swiss banks are legendary for how well they're run. Banks, banking.
What's so special about that?
They're very well respected worldwide. Switzerland stayed neutral during World War II, and the banks were the Nazis, the Allies, the Axis. They all used Swiss banks. Like to this day, there's bank accounts that are frozen in Switzerland that no one can access because the access codes died with their owners. That's full of Nazi treasures and gold, but no one can get into.
What if they guess the number and it worked?
This was before there were like numbers. It was like a passcode.
You could probably like deep down in their journals or something find like code. or
Maybe.
something. It's
But
crazy.
yeah. Countries engage in trade to import goods and services they need, export goods they can market for profit. Comparative advantage enables nations to efficiently produce goods and services. It supports specialization and the efficient use of resources. Over time, relationships changed and improvements in transportation and communication promoted globalization. I'm not reading this next slide. Okay? You're going to see why. I'm not reading that. That ain't happening. I'll hit the high points, but I'm not reading all of it. Some things that have changed over time. You have populations moving to cities. Industrialized countries export labor work to developing nations. For example, the furniture factories that were in Gay Lands, they exported a lot of the jobs to, I think, Vietnam. If the growth of trade alliances, growth of service industries, globalization of markets using technology. This is like e-commerce, okay? Amazon. Widespread marketing of products. You can see Coca-Cola ads, McDonald's ads, and Walmart ads, no matter where you are in the world. Modern transportation networks allow a rapid and efficient exchange of goods. FedEx, UPS, the mail. Instantaneous communication. I can pick this phone up and I can call my friend that lives in California. As long as their house ain't on fire right now, they'll answer.
Whatever, really big.
Questions there? Do what?
I said either they're sleeping or they're
Sure. Good here? I heard yes.
No, one more. Okay, got it.
That's why I upload the keys. Those will help you. The world's increasingly interdependent. Basically, that means all the countries rely on one another. And mainly through economic unions. The European Union's 27 member states located in Europe. NAFTA is on your SOL. It's no longer a thing. Okay? It was signed in 93.
Why is it not a thing?
93 removed tariffs between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. It was a terrible deal. It was replaced on July 1st of this year by the USMCA deal, or the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, also known as USCMA. Sorry, USMCA. All right. More economic unions. ASEAN is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. These are 10 countries in Southeast Asia, not including China, Japan, or Korea. Okay? OPEC is the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. There are 13 countries that account for 44% of the world's oil production and 81.5% of the world's proven oil reserves. Okay, these are mostly in the Middle East and in Venezuela. The leader of OPEC, Saudi Arabia. Economic unions are more efficient. They have access to larger markets, better access to resources without restrictions, and a greater influence on the world market. However, they cause the closing of industries, they concentrate industries in certain countries, and there's difficulty on agreeing to common economic practices and policies between the various nations in the economic union. Ta-da. So, if you guys have any questions, concerns, anything like that, shoot me an email, leave a comment. I'll get it straightened out. And yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. You have vocab, unit notes, test review. You'll have a vocab quiz that goes live tomorrow, test on Friday.